Stakeholder.
In gambling, an independent party with whom each of those who make a wager deposits the money or counters wager.
A person with an interest or concern in something, especially a business.
In emergency management, any person or entity with a vested interest in the survival and recovery of a given community. You.
Welcome to Stakeholder Prepping.
Man, I don't know about you, AC, but I gotta say, I am really liking our intro audio. What do you think?
It's growing on me. I'll be honest. At first, I was a little standoffish, but I really it's hitting hard today, man. But I really like I kind of like how it's the three different definitions of stakeholder, and it kind of doesn't really make sense with the AI voice until you get to the stakeholder definition of it, and then it makes perfect sense. I actually really like that. I really do. I've had mixed reviews from people that have listened to it so far, but I really, I'll tell you, it is growing on me.
Same here, and I think it's part of it is the emergency management definition, like you said, but part of it is
Right.
that music. It switches and goes to like a cold crime drama thriller.
100%. We're gonna. I'm not kidding. I think we might get some amount of listenership out of like single millennial cat chicks who think it's like a true crime drama or something. You know, they're gonna think Keith Morrison is gonna come on and talk about a murder or something.
Everything is all bright and sunny until it's not, and that's what Daryl absolutely nailed when he built that for us. So again,
He did a great job.
thank you to Daryl Eady for that intro.
Well,
That-
I like it. I think Keith Morrison's gonna be like, oh, but was it murder? Like he's just gonna come out of nowhere, and yeah, we might get other people that are just waiting for the true crime drama to show up.
I dig it. Well, welcome to Stakeholder Prepping. This is episode 4, so the tutorial is officially over. If you're still with us, you have made it through all of the game prompts and everything, and now you are into the final game, the paid version, if you will. We've got audio issues fixed for the most part. We're still working through a couple, but your comments definitely help. And we're recording from the road, AC. So all the things that we promised you are now in the final product.
All the stuff we are absolutely not in the same room together, but hopefully you're convinced that we are. Hopefully it sounds like we are. So before we start, I wanted to do a couple of sort of housekeeping items and some follow-ups from episode 2, if that's okay with you, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. That was our 12 items under $1, right?
That was the 12 items under $1. And, you know, we got a lot of feedback. One of the preps under $1 we talked about was the dollar store Jesus candle. And Chris had mentioned,
Yes.
Chris had mentioned that he had used the style of candles before with a simple clay pot placed over them as a space heater. And I got a lot of people who apparently listen to our podcast and have an advanced degree in thermodynamics. And they come out and and talked about some of the hoaxes and how that's been disproven on the internet and things like that. And so I could have addressed that then. Trust me, I like science. I get quarter chub talking about the science behind things. But so let's address that now. And trust me, I love going into the science behind everything. And we had said we like to be fact checked. So I do like to be fact checked. And let's talk about that.
Yeah, I'm definitely down.
Here's how this works. It's true. A candle generates some given amount of heat, and by adding some kind of insulator, like a clay pot, the candle cannot create more heat. You can't do it without adding fuel. You can't create energy. That is true. So the science says if you put a candle with a clay pot over it in a room, it would not heat that space any more than the exact same candle alone. That is true. Absolutely. Everybody who said anything about that, that's true. But, and here's the big but. The candle alone it's radiating some amount of heat, but most of the heat is coming from convection. What that means is that the candle is warming the air above it and the air is rising. And I guess we can go 2 levels deep here. This is going to be like one of these Inception 2-level deep thing, but
Okay.
Here's how this works. And trust me, I love the thermodynamics behind things. Is people say that hot air rises, and it's actually not really true. warm air rises because it's less dense, but truly less dense air rises. And it only rises because gravity exists. Think about this. If you're on the International Space Station and you light a match, which way is the heat going to go?
It just goes everywhere, doesn't it?
It doesn't go up because there's no up. So there's no high density cold air to displace the warm air, the less dense air. So that's just your quick little, this is the thing on heat rising. Now, if you've got this candle that is convecting, it's causing convection and air is rising and the hot air is rising, you put a clay pot over it, what's happening is you're actually trading some of that convection for thermal radiation and thereby concentrating some of the energy produced by the candle lower to the ground. So in practice, if you're sitting Indian style on the floor, or if we're being politically correct, crisscross applesauce on the floor, next to this candle in a cold room, you would feel heat coming off of that candle because it's radiating outward rather than the bulk of the energy going straight up. So yes, you guys are correct. You won't heat a space like a small room any faster or anything like that with the clay pot of the candle, but you will trade some of the convected energy for radiated energy, and you can keep some of the heat closer to you, closer to the ground. Regardless, it's just a freaking candle. It's like 30 watts of power, dude. Chill. It's $1. So that's all we're going to talk about. If you want to challenge me on that, let's go, man. Like I said, I really love going back and forth on the science. So thanks everybody that reached out. That's awesome.
You got some thermal pictures of the pots that you tested, right?
I did. I'm going to put some of that up on the blog. We actually did. So the thermal pot itself does get warmer over more surface area. So it's kind of just like I said, that rather than just the top of the candle getting 500 or 600 degrees and all of that air being lifted through convection, you trade some of the convected energy that would be rising and you dissipate it over radiated energy from the clay pot. So energy would radiate. We've heard of radiant heaters. That's actually a good point. So think about, people have had radiant heaters. So you see like heaters, when you go out to a restaurant that has outdoor dining and there's these big radiant heaters over you. Well, how is it those can possibly warm you up? Because they're above you and heat rises, right?
They deflect it back down with those
they
Captain America looking shield.
That's
devices.
right. You have to remember that there's 3 ways that energy transfers like this. There's convection, which is heating the air. There's conduction, meaning that it touches something, it gets hot, and there's radiation. So there's 3 ways that energy can move, that heat energy can move. And a lot of people forget that these 3 examples actually exist. They just think that it's all about convection, meaning that hot air always rises. But it doesn't always rise. You basically have this 3-sided triangle, and one side gets bigger when one side gets smaller because you're trading energy. So all we've done with the clay pot idea is we've traded some of the convected energy, and that side of the triangle got a little smaller, and we've traded that for radiated energy into the clay pot, and that side of the triangle got a little larger. So if you're in a little tiny closet and you light a candle, it's not going to get the closet any hotter by putting a clay pot on it, but it will concentrate the heat closer to you. So
and
I think we spent enough time on that, right?
Yeah. How long did you get your candle to burn for?
Oh my gosh, the Jesus candle. Let me tell you, man, that actually burned for 55 hours in a colder, controlled environment, no wind. I think that's got a lot to do with it. So in a controlled environment with no wind and a trimmed wick, but all in one go, that thing burned for 55 hours.
For an emergency situation, I think I'd take that.
1,000% any day of the week. So that's all we have to say about the Jesus candle. I've wasted like 10 minutes on that. The other thing from episode 2 I did want to touch on is we had talked about the P38 can opener, and you had mentioned that was a good key ring, and I said I'm going to try to get one of those onto the airplane. Let's take it through TSA. So I would say yes, I have taken that through TSA. One thing I did notice, I didn't realize I had the P51 can opener. So I actually had the bigger can opener rather than the 38 millimeter can opener. I had the 51 millimeter can opener, and no problem on the key ring, right through TSA, and no issue. So that is now a permanent fixture on my keyring. We're gonna hang on to the P51 can opener, and like I said,
Sweet.
anybody that wants one, let me know. I'll send you one. If you're the guy cutting your cans open with a knife, I can't know that. So you have to send us an email and let me send you a P51 can opener. But so those are the two follow-ups. P51 definitely goes onto the keyring, and I think maybe next week or the week after we'll bring you my EDC through TSA episode. And Chris, what's EDC specifically?
Everyday carry. I like it. We'll
Everyday
definitely work
carry.
that one in.
So we'll work it in, because that just became another. I thought I had the TSA game locked, and now I realize I was missing something, and that was a World War II can opener. So that goes with me. That goes with me through TSA now. So that is my rant for the beginning of episode 4. What do you have?
Well, let's go over what episode 4 is actually going to be.
Okay.
I don't know how familiar you are with this one because you're not exactly in the right spot of the country, but have you heard of the Waffle House Index?
It's funny. I had never heard of this. I started looking into it when you brought it up. It's amazing. It's mind-boggling to me that this exists. But no, I had never heard of this until you said something.
Yeah, it's one of those really kind of quirky things that if you apply it correctly, it's a pretty significant tool. So today we're going to be looking at why the Waffle House Index is a uniquely unofficial measure of disaster severity that's used by FEMA and other agencies to gauge their response efforts.
Crazy.
And I mean, let's jump right into it. So
Go for it.
what is the Waffle House Index? It's a basic measure that's used by FEMA to determine the severity of disasters based on Waffle House restaurant closures. Because Waffle House is designed and designated to remain open 24/7, 365 every day of the year, closure of one of those restaurants represents either significant damage to the restaurant itself or a direct threat to life and limb. And then we end up with different levels of service, basically.
Oh, that's crazy. So I was looking at this. You've got this like green, yellow, red. So there are actually different menus if they do stay open, right? So how's that work?
So if it's at a green level, that's basically your full menu. The restaurant has power. There's minimal or no damage. It's life as regular, right? But then you go to your yellow level, that's going to be a limited menu. So you either have power absent, or it's being delivered by a generator, or maybe food supplies are running low, can't get things in to actually serve them. And then you go to your red level, and that's the restaurant is closed. There's severe damage, significant or severe flooding, severe destruction to the restaurant. It cannot operate. And that's where understanding if Waffle House in your area, particularly if you live in the South or the East, for hurricanes in particular, understanding that menu gives you an indication of how bad the damage outside of your home is.
That's crazy. And we talked a little bit about this, I think, in episode 3 about how slow the federal government moves just in general. It takes them a long time, but they're a freight train. And when they do move, they go. But with the Waffle House, this is a private business, and there's people that go to work there. They're not first responders. They don't have to go to work. So this is like an immediate gauge of probably what an emergency response is going to look like, right?
Exactly. And when we look at the history of it, it all comes down to back in 2011. There was an administrator of FEMA. His name is Craig Fugate. And do you remember back in 2011, the Joplin, Missouri tornado?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, yeah, like 1,000 people got injured or died or something. I mean, it was big, right? I remember it was a very big deal.
Yeah, it was a massive tornado, and the town of Joplin was severely damaged. Unfortunately, 158 people lost their lives, and there were over 1,100 injured.
Okay.
But both of the local Waffle House restaurants, they remained open.
Oh my gosh. So, and did they have a limited menu at the time, or was this pre-Waffle House indexy stuff?
This was because this was actually what coined it. So Craig
Oh,
Fugate,
okay.
he went to Joplin, Missouri to evaluate damage, and he saw that both Waffle Houses were still open, still serving, and he wanted to understand the process. So he kind of went in and talked to the employees and coined the Waffle House Index, and now it's a standing tool.
That's crazy. So how does that work? What's I don't know. Go describe things because I'm still a little unclear.
So to understand this, you have to understand really the resilience of Waffle House and why Waffle House restaurants are they're among the last ones to close and first to reopen during disaster. So according to AccuWeather, Waffle House, especially the locations in areas that get a lot of hurricanes, has a reputation for its effective handling of disasters. It has a limited menu prepared for times of food shortages and power outages. It also assembles Waffle House jump teams who can quickly reopen the restaurant after a disaster and as soon as it's safe to do so. So almost all Waffle Houses are built with the same basic layout, just like McDonald's. I mean, you walk into one McDonald's, the fry machine is always the first thing on the left-hand side, right?
Oh,
Waffle
so
Houses,
even just the way they're set up inside is the same.
exactly. They all
Oh,
have the
okay. All right.
same basic layout. So you walk in
Mhm.
the front door, you have your main griddle station, bathrooms are always off to the right, and you've got tables all the way down to the left. It's almost
Okay.
exactly the same. And their storage is in the back. But they also are designed to work during the power outage. So they have local electricity, just your basic city or county service like any other
Sure.
business. But they also have generators that operate if electricity fails. So in a lot of those hurricane prone areas, a lot of them actually have tri-fuel generators. So they can take gas, propane, or diesel just to keep the
Oh,
lights on and the grill running.
yeah. You're talking my language now. We're definitely doing like an alternative power episode. So when you say tri-fuel, you're talking about they will take gas or probably unleaded gas. I don't think you do tri-fuel with the diesel, but they would do unleaded gas, or they would do propane, or they would do natural gas that's plumbed there. And the trade-off obviously is that when you're running gasoline, it's higher energy. You could run more stuff off it, but then you've got to deal with fueling it up, and you've got to deal with a dirty carburetor, which if you put natural gas or propane, you're going to get lower wattage output of the generator, but it'll run for freaking ever, and it really doesn't even dirty the oil that much because it's just this super clean gas with no additives, right?
Precisely. And so regardless of what is going on with the fuel supply, as long as they
Okay.
have a valid fuel for it, they can keep the lights on, keep the grill running. And
Okay.
really, when you look at FEMA's definition of it, and this is actually right from the FEMA website, the index itself isn't just about whether or not you can get pralines on your waffles or if you can get waffles at all, but rather about the damage in a neighborhood. If a Waffle House can serve a full menu, they've likely got power or are running on a generator. A limited menu means an area may not have running water or electricity, but there's gas for the stove to make bacon, eggs, coffee, etc. So that's really where this resilient mindset comes from. And Waffle House took that to the max, especially I didn't know that there were Waffle House jump teams. It's like smoke jumpers for restaurants.
That's what I was thinking. They're just like bailing out with like a parachute with big piece of bacon or an egg on it or something. Like these guys, yeah, and it's crazy. There's actually, yeah, they have Waffle House jump teams. So I mean, from your world in the insurance world, I'm sure you've dealt with having catastrophes where you get on, you go drive somewhere because you can't fly in, and if you've got a massive natural disaster, your property claims teams will go in there and they'll be on the ground. Some of the first people, right? I've seen that you've got property claims adjusters that are there at ground zero almost immediately after something happens. And it sounds like so are the Waffle House employees.
Yeah, absolutely. And the company that I work for, I won't name that company, but they have response vehicles and they actually plan for disaster response ahead of
Okay.
time. Depending on your insurance company, they may or may not have the same level of assets to deal with. So it may be just one local guy scrambling as fast as he can without a
Sure.
whole lot of support. But that's the
Yeah.
idea of resilience and exactly what you're talking about. Get people on the ground as fast as they can. That way, you can start the recovery process earlier.
Yeah, and I love that we're talking this again. Kind of goes back to the stuff we talked about in the last episode, where when you're waiting on government relief, we're not saying that that's bad or that the government isn't going to do the right thing necessarily. What we're saying is that the government just takes time to spool up their massive amount of resources. And when you can act smaller in that smaller communal level, whether it is your insurance company or a Waffle House, they can move quickly. These smaller teams of people can move quickly. So it's your gauge of how bad something is going to be long term, because you have to watch what private industry does because they're just more efficient, right?
Exactly. And not just that. I mean, Waffle House itself has this cultural significance to us. We look to Waffle House to help support us, or for really, interesting TikTok videos. We'll go that way. But Waffle House, you just don't mess around with. And up in the Pacific Northwest, where you're normally at, I know you're on the road this week,
Yep.
but you don't have any Waffle Houses, do you?
We have nothing like that. No, not at all. It's crazy. And I've probably been to a Waffle House 5 times in my life, but definitely have on the road. And obviously there's even like the secret menu thing, right? The scattered whatever, like the way you order all your stuff. But I remember, and this was not necessarily the kind of natural disaster that would shut everything down, but I was down in May-ish of 2010. I was down in the Gulf for the Deepwater Horizon incident. I was out on ships with a couple of agencies that were helping clean up the oil. And so
Oh yeah.
yeah, I mean, it was huge. And so I was operating out of southern Louisiana, and although yeah, there was no natural disaster that would have shut stuff down, but the Waffle House was almost like it was the community center. It was town hall. Every single one of those guys, from BP to O'Brien's Group to NRC to the Marine Spillage Response Corporation, all of those guys, they were at the Waffle House every day in their hard hats and their Mickey Mouse boots, talking about cleaning up oil. And if you were a fly on the wall in there, I think you would have a much better idea of how the spill response was going just by listening to people in the Waffle House than you ever would by listening to the official statements out of somebody like BP or the news. 100%. Like, you knew what was going on by sitting in a Waffle House.
Absolutely. And I mean, that definitely makes sense, because they've got 1,600 restaurants that basically goes from the mid-Atlantic all the way down to Florida and then all across the Gulf Coast. And all of those areas are prone to hurricanes. They're vulnerable to hurricanes, but that's why, especially down southeast, you have this sense of community, because the Waffle House has always been there. It's always open. 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you can go and get a quality meal for relatively inexpensive.
That's amazing.
And the Waffle House, when it comes to disaster response, if you're a small business or if you're a corporation, either one, if there's a disaster and you are closed, you're not making money, but you still have those expenses, right? You still have your power, you still have your money that you sunk into your raw materials that you resell, or the rent is due on the building that you're renting out. None of those expenses disappear just because a disaster rolled through.
Yeah, that's
so
right. You have fixed overhead costs that are always there regardless. I think you could probably speak to some of the insurance relief that exists for some of those people, but sure, your fixed overhead costs, those costs exist whether you are open or not.
Exactly. And so you want to reopen as quickly as possible. But Waffle House, they spend almost zero on advertising, and they've built this marketing strategy around kind of the goodwill gained from being open when customers are desperate. And so that's their motivation is, honestly, I think that's probably when they make their biggest impact on the community, is helping out after disaster, getting everyone fed, clean water, coffee, keep everybody sane. And that's probably their busiest times, is right after something major.
Now, you're not employed by or sponsored by Waffle House, right?
I am not.
I am not either. I just want to make sure everyone understands where this is definitely like a very Waffle Housey feel good story. I didn't know we were going to go this way with it, but it's important to point out that neither one of us, I'm not even a customer. So yeah, neither one of us have any affiliation, anything Waffle Housey. It's just a really amazing story.
I have not been into a Waffle House in probably 3.5 or 4 years.
Oh, okay. All right. I assumed you were a regular, but all right. I am not. Like I said, we don't have them.
Hey, exactly. And like you said about the BP spill, the Deepwater
Mhm.
Horizon, I mean, Waffle House didn't have to close for that. But
Right.
if you look at other historical events, so the year after Deepwater Horizon in 2011, do you remember Hurricane Irene? It was a Category 3 hurricane, and it made landfall multiple times.
Yeah,
And it
of
kind of
course.
yo-yoed, right?
Mhm.
So there were 22 restaurants across North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware that got hit and had to shut down. But by the evening of the day after, all but one were back open in business, to give you an
Wow.
idea of the response time.
That's crazy.
Like 21 out of 22. And it all came from basically Katrina. I know I harped on that one in the last episode with government response, but with FEMA and other agencies using that Waffle House index, even though it didn't quite exist back then, Waffle House really fully embraced post-disaster business strategies after Katrina. So it had, I think, 7 restaurants completely destroyed, and more than 100 others were closed. So they would have been red menu or completely closed.
Mhm.
And the ones that they were able to reopen quickly, they just got swamped with customers. And this actually made it into an academic paper by a guy named, I'm going to totally butcher this name, but I think it's Panos Kouvelis.
Mhm.
He is actually a professor at Washington University in St. Louis, and he designated Waffle House as one of the top 4 companies for disaster response, along with Walmart, Lowe's, and Home Depot. So you've got your food, reconstruction materials,
Mhm.
and general warehouse. And those 4 companies really use similar model. So even Walmart has jump teams like Waffle House does to reopen stores.
That's insane. It's those 3 would have made sense to me. You said Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's. I get it. Like if you've got something that goes down and you need to board up the house, or you need emergency supplies, you need a bunch of Jesus candles. Those are the companies I would think that you would need. But Waffle House. If I had 1,000 guesses, that wouldn't have been one of them.
Exactly. And it's not something that you really think about until you're driving along hungry and need food, and
Mhm.
Waffle House is right there. But the Waffle House Index is not the only thing that makes a difference in government planning or emergency planning from businesses, things like that. So it's just kind of an extra tool. You've got your Saffir-Simpson scale. That's the category 1, category 2, hurricane strength, and it measures through wind speed, rainfall, several other factors, but that's what kind of determines that Cat 1 to Cat 5. You know what
Okay.
I'm talking about?
Yeah, of course. Yep. That's the kind of, yep. That's the Cat 5 hurricane type. Yep. Get it.
Exactly. So the Waffle House Index is more a tool to determine the areas that are hardest hit from that event, and it takes into account kind of the unforeseen or unpredicted factors after the initial event. So think about this. If you've got an area that gets hit by a tornado, tornadoes are a lot smaller impact areas than hurricanes are,
Sure.
but it can still do a ton of damage. I grew up with
Mhm.
them. We had tornado drills all the time when I was in elementary school. Well, if your Waffle House has to close because the water pipes were broken because of tornado damage,
Mhm.
that's a bigger indicator of there's a building down and it's a mile away from the Waffle House. But if that Waffle House has to close because of the tornado, something is wrong in between it. So that can help to
Oh,
kind of
Sure.
scale
Yeah.
your response effort.
Mm-hmm. Wow,
And
that's crazy.
did you know, and I'm sure you've seen this before, especially with all of the travel that you've done, uh, eggs, ice, other critical materials being pre-staged outside of areas before an event happens. Have you seen
Oh
that?
yeah, of course. Yeah, I actually my cousin, he used to drive truck for a living, and so they would stage in areas before something's getting hit. They'd call up this company like, we need a 53-foot semi trailer to go out full of water and MREs before something made the landfall. It's funny you mention eggs though. I'm gonna go back to the practical a little bit, but I don't know if you knew this, because I mean you live in a real neighborhood and stuff like that, but I have
Yes.
chickens, and anybody that does own chickens knows this, that the U.S. is the only place where we refrigerate eggs like that, because when an egg comes out of a chicken, and I'm not a biologist here, but when it comes out of chicken, there is a coating on the egg that keeps it lasting longer. But Americans won't buy a nasty chicken poop covered egg from the store, and so they wash them. And when you wash eggs, that's why they have a 2-week shelf life, and why they have to remain refrigerated. If you go anywhere else in the world, most places in the world, you go to Europe, the eggs are sitting on a shelf. They're not in the cooler, and they last for 6 weeks, because naturally an egg can sit there as long as it's not warm and it is unfertilized. It will turn to a chicken, but it will sit there and it will remain. It'll be a good egg. I keep my eggs on the counter, and I'm not kidding. You can easily get 4 to 6 weeks out of a fresh chicken egg. And the only reason things like that have to be refrigerated at the Waffle House is because store-bought eggs are washed, and when they're washed, the egg material itself is a semi-porous material, and air can get in and it can spoil the egg.
That's not fair.
It's crazy, right? It's just, this is an American. We want clean, shiny, white eggs, and because of that, your eggs are not going to last as long, and they're going to, they're going to go bad. And here's the little trick for people that don't know, whether you have chickens or not. This is a trick that, if you're not sure if your eggs are still good or not, I don't know, Chris, if you know this, but it has nothing to do with the expiration date. You can take the egg and put it in a pot of water. And if the egg sinks, the egg is still good. If the egg floats, then air has permeated the shell, and it's probably gone bad.
We have done that, and
The egg sink trick. Yep.
we've had to toss a few because we let them go way too long. But
Sure.
I didn't know it's just because we washed.
It's just because we wash them. If you kept a dirty egg fresh out of a chicken's butt and put it on your counter, it would last for weeks and weeks without being refrigerated. And it's because we want nice, pretty clean eggs at the supermarket is the reason they have a 2-week shelf life.
That's just so insane to me that
It's one of the most American things you can think of, though, really.
it is.
Right?
It really
it's
is.
it's just such an American thing that we just, no, I want a pretty white, shiny egg, and I don't care if it doesn't make any sense at all. So I completely railroaded that conversation. Continue.
Well, I was going to ask, I mean, how do you, with what we've gone over so far, how do you feel about the Waffle House Index? What are your big takeaways?
No, one, it's too bad that it's regional, right? That's the thing that I wish. It makes me want Waffle Houses everywhere. So you kind of had this indication, and you can actually see all over the country when something happens. But I'm trying to think of the other natural disasters that would affect this, because really it's the hurricanes and tornadoes, maybe earthquakes. I guess earthquakes could affect the Waffle House Index if you had it in an earthquake area or forest fires or something. But I was trying to think of, would the Waffle House Index work with all of the natural and or man-made disasters that we could have, or is it better in the South?
Well, that's where we take in things like mutual aid. So
Sure.
what a
Okay.
mutual aid agreement is in the emergency management sphere, it's two larger organizations, whether it's, county A and county B, or state C and state, we'll say C again, because there's
Okay.
multiple states that start with C. Um, or individual companies basically signing an agreement that says, if you need help, give us a call and we will help you. If
Mhm.
we need help, we're going to give you a call and you come help us. You see that a lot between fire departments and police organizations, whether it's city and sheriff in the county, or if it's, um, you know, firefighters out battling a forest fire
Yeah,
in
you see that a
California.
lot in the agencies that I work with. I mean, this makes perfect sense. If you think about, if you're chasing a speeding car and the speeding car goes over state lines, I think there's probably these urban legends that, well, as long as you can make it to the state line or the county line, you've heard that before, then you're free and clear because that agency doesn't have jurisdiction past wherever you happen to commit that crime. But that's exactly it. They call it mutual aid. And so agencies that border each other generally have mutual aid agreements that allows for a county sheriff in the state of Kentucky can follow someone into the state of Ohio. And although they don't have state jurisdiction, they're not deputized by the state. They have a mutual aid agreement that allows them to work with that agency in the neighboring state so they can chase people across borders. And that happens, again, like you said, at the municipal level, at the county level, and at the state level. And then obviously federal agencies, they're all federally deputized. So I don't think like Coast Guard needs a mutual aid agreement with CBP because they're both federal agencies. They're both federally deputized to kind of do the same kind of stuff. But yeah, a mutual aid is a big thing in the entire first responder community.
Exactly. And no matter how fast you're driving, if you think you are Nicolas Cage in Gone in 60 Seconds, doesn't matter. You cannot outrun the radio.
You can't outrun the Motorola, man. That's exactly right. You cannot outrun the radio.
So, did you know that it kind of touched on it there, but you have private companies that are also taking a look at this and providing mutual aid agreements. So, back in Texas, there's a large chain called HEB. With all of your travel, have you been to an HEB?
Yeah. That's like a grocery store, right?
Exactly. And
Yep.
have you been to Florida down where Publix is the big one?
Yep. Of course. Yep.
Did you know that HEB from Texas and Publix from Florida have a mutual support and an aid agreement?
And they're not owned by the same parent company?
They're not.
Really?
So Publix, after Hurricane Harvey, Publix helped raise money for the Red Cross to deliver to Harvey victims. But after Irma, HEB sent raw supplies over to Publix to refill their coolers.
That's crazy. You would never think that a public or sorry, a private company, maybe even a publicly traded company would ever do something like that. That's amazing.
And all of that came from kind of that mutual support, community-based stakeholders taking a look at everything and saying, hey, they need help. We're going to help them. Our profits are going to go down while we help them. That's okay. It's important that they get the supplies they need. And that was all kind of inspired by the Waffle House Index.
And I'm going to go back to this. We go back and forth to this a lot, but I'm going to go back to this where when you talk about what the federal government would have to do in order to get food to that community, they would have to hire a truck because they probably don't own any. Maybe they'll throw MREs in a deuce and a half, but really they're going to contract that out to a third-party contractor. Then that third-party contractor has to make their way to the nearest National Guard armory or something, and they have to pick up a bunch of MREs that you cannot live off of for more than 45 days. And then they somehow have to get those MREs somewhere else, or they have to pick up some bottles of water. Where you talk about like an HEB, they have a lot more of their own supply chain in house. They've got vehicles there. They probably have a contract. They already have a contract in place with someone to move goods, and they could easily load up goods at a distribution center. And it's not, we got to go somewhere for MREs and somewhere for water. It's all right there, load it up and take it across state lines. So those private companies would just be so much more efficient at this conceptually. I don't know. I'm kind of talking my ass here. I'm just sort of saying, conceptually speaking, that makes a lot more sense to me.
Well, and that's exactly why the decision planning P of emergency disaster planning involves stakeholders from all around. So that's what we're all about. Be your own stakeholder and kind of take that ownership. But you can look at some of the warning signs. And yes, the the federal government is going to start moving. But like we've said, it's a freight train. It moves on one track and it takes forever to get going. Smaller organizations, such as your local fire and EMS, your local police, your county fire and EMS, your county police, they're going to have a much faster reaction time because they're so much smaller.
Yeah, of
And
course.
understanding that the Waffle House Index is, yes, they do pre-stage stuff so that they can get their jump teams out there and get to recovery faster. That's really small and kind of difficult to understand and see warning sign. If you see a bunch of Waffle House trucks lined up at a rest stop just outside of an impending hurricane zone, you know it's going to be bad. But there are other warning signs of impending severe disasters. The Waffle House Index is just not the only one. So have you heard of what an inversion curve is?
I'm guessing just sort of like an upside down bell curve, but maybe I'm all wet on that.
You're right, but it applies specifically to the stock market.
Okay, sure.
So an inversion curve shows that it's a predecessor for a market recession. And historically, they have predicted how bad the recession is. So all the way back to the 1929 crash in the 80s, Black Tuesday, the 2008 crash, we had these huge recession or inversion curves just before the recession. And we are currently in one. But you can also look at the price of alcohol or the availability of alcohol, milk, bread, batteries, gasoline, bottled water, all of those hard items, they jump in sales just before a major event. So if you're looking at your store inventory levels, you can kind of get an initial idea of the severity. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And if you look at all those things you just listed, besides milk, I guess, all of those things, those are all things that you could stop right now that have virtually no expiration date or expiration date that is more than a year, right? I mean, you could stock your alcohol and your batteries and your gasoline and your bottled water, and then you don't have to go fight someone at a gas station for them when bad shit goes down.
Exactly. Or if you forget to go to the gas station to refill your 5-gallon lawnmower jug, as I have done multiple times.
Of course. Yep.
But yeah, you're exactly right. If you're stocked up on that, you don't have to worry about it. And then if you're going to the grocery store and you see that stuff is out, you're already prepared for what can happen, but you can get an idea of how bad things might get.
So don't take part in the inversion curve.
Exactly.
Don't take part in it. Do it right now. Right now. Go out and get your gas and your batteries and your, I guess, bread. I'm going to put bread kind of on the list because pretty much anybody who survived COVID made sourdough with all the stuff that you've got in your cupboard. So pretty much besides the milk, you could have all that stuff in stock and not be part of the inversion curve later.
Chocolate dill pickle sourdough.
Oh wow, that's interesting. I'm gonna need a recipe for that. I did a lot of I found a recipe that involved local honey, and because I make my own honey, it actually helped it rise a little better. I'm gonna say probably because the local yeast, maybe, but a little bit of local honey in the sourdough mix. It was plain. It wasn't anything fancy like that, but I got pretty good at it. I'm a fan. And again, that's all stuff that the sourdough bread is made out of things that you have that have virtually no shelf life.
I will tell you the chocolate dill pickle, not exactly my favorite. It didn't come off the way I think the person who made it wanted it to come off. No offense to them, but just not my cup of tea. But yeah, we found honey and we found a couple of mead recipes. So we ended up getting yeast and we've got all of the supplies to make our own mead.
Gosh, we could do a whole episode on how you actually don't need to buy these things. You just need to have a couple of things in stock. If you've got a still, and they're very inexpensive these days, a nice copper still, you could make your own booze. You don't need to buy that. You could make your own fuel. You don't need to buy that. I mean, pretty much the only thing on this list here is you probably need a cow. But besides the cow, and there's some very good powdered milks out there with virtually no expiration date. And again, I don't like to name drop too much because again, we're not sponsored by anybody, but Nutrient Survival has a very good like nutrient powdered milk with a 20-year shelf life or something. So you can stock long-term milk. Besides all this other stuff, I think you and I
I
even went
have,
back and forth on ways to make a battery.
yeah, I have always been impressed with Nutrient Survival and the quality of their stuff.
I
Again,
have
we're
to.
not
They,
sponsored, but
not sponsored. I hope we are. Maybe they'll hear it. Email them this episode. Tell them how much we liked it. But yeah, if you look at everything else on your list here, yeah, you don't have to spend a ton of money to choose not to participate in the inversion curve.
exactly. And I mean, it really comes down to how are you going to interpret your warning signs, which we'll do a whole nother episode on warning signs, some of the
I like
unknown
that.
ones.
I
I'm
like that.
excited for the stripper index, just saying.
The stripper index.
Hey, um, how do you use that tool and those kind of warning signs as a measure, or how do you evolve that into a tool for
Mhm.
your betterment? You know,
Mhm.
there's a guy that works with FEMA. His name is Dan Stone King, and he was asked in an interview about Craig Fugate. And so this is a quote directly from him. As Craig often says, the Waffle House test doesn't just tell us how quickly a business might rebound, it also tells us how the larger community is faring. The sooner restaurants, grocery, and corner stores or banks can reopen, the sooner local economies will start generating revenue again, signaling a stronger recovery for that community. The success of the private sector in preparing for and weathering disasters is essential to a community's ability to recover in the long run. And that was from somebody who works with FEMA.
Wow, because it's not obviously it's not just about the people in the community, and it's not just about that FEMA response. But you're right, the private businesses have to recover before the community can recover.
Exactly.
Wow.
Otherwise, it's everybody running around like a chicken with their head cut off, right?
Sure.
So that's where just gaining a different perspective can be critical. Is how are your businesses, especially the locally owned ones? I've worked for local owned businesses several times in the past, and they have advantages that the corporate world can never experience, but they also have huge disadvantages that the corporate world is able to take for granted, basically. And so understanding how they are going to flex and focus on disaster recovery gives you a pretty good indication of how the overall community is doing.
Yeah, of course. Wow, that's crazy. I'd never even considered anything like that.
And unfortunately, there's no real way to predict how something like the Waffle House Index will evolve into a tool, especially a predictive tool. I mean, right now it's a preliminary precursor tool for evaluating after a disaster strikes, but I don't know that we can really get that to flex to the other side unless you see. What are you thinking?
Well, yeah, you would need more, like I said before, you need them everywhere, but you need more Waffle Houses. It really is like that. I'm picturing like the the red, green, blue model on a giant map across the country where you could easily see the wave and especially how it interacts with the highway system or the rail system or even the river system. I think that if you could put all of the infrastructure together with Waffle Houses everywhere, then what you're saying would make perfect sense. You really could get an idea. I'm just picturing looking at this thing across the entire country, and you could see how some kind of disaster, even on a national scale, would would impact everything across a given area or the map.
Okay, so turn it into almost a live inventory system, and
Yeah.
but not just for inventory, for condition of the restaurant.
Yeah, right, exactly. Not condition of, but you could even use it for condition of the highway system or the rail system. You think about if you had an idea of how these goods got to market and what kind of menu the Waffle House was operating on, you could tell whether there were choke points in the actual infrastructure of the country.
See, now we're thinking outside the box. I like
We're
it.
thinking outside the box. If you've got Waffle Houses everywhere and you say, oh, look at that, you've got, I-90 and there's a choke point on I-90 and obviously over some given bridge, and then all the Waffle Houses on the other side of that bridge happen to be on a yellow menu or something. So if you had enough of them and you could overlay a map like that with the rest of the infrastructure, and we're talking about, like you mentioned, water earlier, but there's water, there's power, there's roads, there's rail, there's river system. You really could get an idea of where those choke points are.
So what I'm hearing is we need more data.
We need more data points.
Let's get on it, FEMA.
That's right. Open up FEMA-sponsored Waffle Houses.
Or maybe FEMA-sponsored stakeholder prepping, if we could nail that one.
Right. You probably have some contacts over there. Maybe you can get some of them to help us out. Sure.
I think it's going to be very interesting how everything kind of develops in the future, because there is a history of our natural disasters becoming more frequent, becoming more severe, partially due to climate change, partially due to all the crap that we put into the atmosphere. As seedling for clouds, all of the dust and oil smudge and everything like that just becomes cloud fuel, basically. So I don't know how everything is going to change in the future. And I'm trying to stay kind of apolitical about this, but there's a chance that we're going to have to come up with some brand new tools to combat our own recovery processes in the future.
I wonder if you could this is something that we could actually do, is if you looked at historical Waffle House addresses and where they have moved. Because they're smarter than us. When the Waffle House moves to higher ground, the sea level has risen or there's a impending tsunami or something, right? If a Waffle House is over you could look at the 20-year Waffle House data and see where Waffle Houses have opened and closed and where ones have moved. You would actually get a really good idea of some of those longer term climate changing things, right?
I'll bet we could. And you could do the same thing with Lowe's, Walmart, Home Depot, a lot of those places too.
Yeah, sure. Exactly right. Yeah. When you have more frequent disasters that require a Lowe's or a Home Depot, then you could probably you can predict those trends. You probably could get what we call a heat map, right? You could get a heat map of where more of those disasters happen to need recovery based on the population around and based on the natural disasters that show up.
I build heat maps in Excel all day, so I'm absolutely game to see what we can come up with on that.
We need historical address changes and new openings and closings of Lowe's, Walmart, Home Depot, and Waffle Houses. We could do it.
So if you are listening and you know that one has moved, send us an email and we'll start putting this together.
We're going to get inundated with people who want their Waffle House back.
What? Waffle House moved 2 blocks down. I don't like this anymore.
I don't like it. I can't walk there anymore. It means there's a tornado coming to my house.
I have to put on more than just pajama pants.
No, they're just gonna Uber it in the pajama pants, I'm sure.
I can't say I blame them, because I've done the same thing. I've been at Waffle House at 3:30 in the morning after a satellite control shift and just, okay, yep, this is happening. I'm getting food.
I think about this sometimes. If you ever just go out in public, you're probably going to lose a little faith in, the U.S. being a giant superpower anymore. And maybe we should just focus on leaving the house not in our pajamas.
I can abide by that. I can do that. So, yeah,
So
the
give us the
Waffle House
recap.
Index.
What did we just learn?
The Waffle House Index, it is not how spicy the customers are.
Okay.
It is not how defensive the employees are. They're standing their ground. It is truly a tool for disaster recovery.
That's
and there's
crazy.
a lot that we can take from it.
And this is something that you've got these key government agencies that rely on the Waffle House as their, their bellwether, their model of what they're going to do, and what their response is going to be like. It's one of the tools. That's amazing to me.
Exactly. I think it's a great tool, and not a lot of people know about it, but now you do.
So
You know?
what are you going to tell people to do with the information?
Well, I think this is more along the lines of really what we were focused on last time is look at what's going on around you. Be aware of your surroundings.
Mhm.
Understand how little things can have a much larger impact, and really kind of focus on taking care of yourself so that you can help others. It's, I think you said it last time, or maybe we were just riffing offline, but you said something about the oxygen tanks on, or the oxygen masks on a plane, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you put your own on first and then tend to everyone else, because if you don't have it on, you could pass out, you could fail in
And
helping them.
you can't render aid to someone else.
Exactly. So Waffle House has this on point as far as getting the community back up on its feet. And I think individually, you need to look at getting yourself on your feet and then providing aid. And maybe all you do is go and take ticket numbers at Waffle House to help out.
Everything about that. Okay, that was actually that was super interesting to me. I know that you and I both come from completely diverse backgrounds, and I just do not have any background. One in the South, but two in the in the emergency management side of things. So I mean that really is interesting to me, that how this is a tool, and I think there are a lot of these other tools that you and I could probably go more in depth with that will help people out.
Yeah. And so there is, real quick, I know we're not sponsored. I want to throw this
Mhm.
out there. There is a book by an author named Kate Gilronan, and it's kind of a young adult romance novel, if you can get past that. But it's called Prepper by Kate Gilronan. And that goes into detail on the Waffle House Index pretty significantly and what it means on the ground. So I don't know if you I know it's on Amazon. If you go to Amazon or wherever you get your books, I don't think it's available in audiobook right now. Um, Maybe I can talk to her and see if we can record it. But it actually goes into quite a bit of detail on what the Waffle House Index looks like from the ground. And I think we should try to get her on one of these episodes to go over kind of her experience and writing it down in novel form.
Yeah, that would be very cool. She's probably a lot more elegant than either one of us to talk about it. But no, that would be awesome. If we could get other professionals or actual professionals involved, that would be pretty fun.
I think so too. But speaking of fun, as of this recording, has anyone sent in the correct logo information?
No, actually, we've had a lot of engagement. A lot of people have taken some really good stabs at it. I was recently with a friend of mine, and he hadn't listened to our episode yet. He goes, "Hey man, I'm sorry, I downloaded it. I made it through the first 13 minutes. I got to work. I couldn't listen to the rest of it." And he didn't know we were talking about the logo itself. And I said, would you have a guess on the logo? And he immediately knew exactly what it was. So not all hope is lost. It's crazy that he knew exactly what it was and what it means. So Jeremy, if you're listening, you are not allowed, and none of your friends can write in either. I'll know based on grammar and syntax whether they're your buddies or not. So they're
Yes,
excluded.
Jeremy.
Yeah, Jeremy. But I think I want to drop a hint that I'm gonna say that for everybody listening, the logo is a lion's paw. I think that's a good enough hint that I bet somebody can pick it up. And so if you guess what the logo is, what it means, what the significance is culturally, why we picked it, then we're going to send you a bunch of stuff. I mean, some very cool tactical stuff, some prepper goodies, a lot of things that I pick up on the road and in my travels from companies I work with and agencies I work with. So we're going to send you some very cool stuff. So I keep trying to guess. As of this recording, no one has guessed yet. And yeah, that's about all I had. Was there anything else you had to go over? Maybe you want to tease the next episode a little bit?
You know, I feel like I've been doing a lot of talking on this one, and I think next episode is going to be pretty well fire. So, how do we want to tease that?
Yeah, I will. So next episode is, I think, going to be based on its travel stuff. It's the travel preps. I think anybody that gets on an airplane will benefit from this information. And this, whether you are a pro traveler and you travel as much as me and you're on and off airplanes and in and out of the country every week, or you're somebody that doesn't travel very often and you want to take the family to Disneyland next year, I think that there's going to be some very good actionable items, very simple, pragmatic stuff that everybody across the spectrum, whoever thinks about getting on an airplane, or just or just approaching everyday life where maybe you have to go through some level of security and can't take all of your EDC items that you normally would. I think the information we would give you is probably going to benefit people that go to a concert, or go to the courthouse or the post office or somewhere else where maybe you're not you're not packing 16 guns and ammo and a case MRE. So I'm excited to kind of lay out my sort of typical daily loadout when I've got to get through security. I think it's going to provide some good actionable intel.
I like it, and it's exactly the tactical from practical that we've been going after. So come back next week. We will do EDC through TSA. But in the meantime, remember, you are your own stakeholder. We'll see you next week.